This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
This is a very dumb thing to do.
Counter-strike. Canada is retaliating against Donald Trump's punishing tariffs on Canadian goods. It was the first day of the trade war with our southern neighbors and across the country, including here in Nova Scotia. Canadians are finding ways to fight back. At midnight, a 25% U.S. tariff took effect on Canadian goods. A 10% rate will apply to the energy sector. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had pointed criticism for the White House today and for Donald Trump himself.
Today, the United States launched a trade war against Canada, their closest partner and ally, their closest friend. At the same time, they're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator. Make that make sense.
Canada is responding with 25% counter tariffs on $30 billion of U.S. goods. Another $125 billion worth are planned if the U.S. doesn't rescind its levies in 3 weeks. Canada is also filing dispute resolution claims with the World Trade Organization and under the North American Trade Agreement. Well, here in Nova Scotia, politicians are also clapping back. Premier Tim Houston was in Toronto today and donning a Nova Scotia tartan scarf, he firmly placed the blame for the current trade war on the U.S. president. Taryn Grant reports.
No time for mincing words on a day like this.
Donald Trump is a short-sighted man who yields his power just for the sake of it.
Just after midnight Tuesday, the American president did what he's been threatening to do for months: blanket tariffs on Canadian goods. The federal government is responding with a first round of retaliatory tariffs, while provinces and territories are taking steps of their own.
We support the efforts of the federal government, and we will take actions that amplify this support.
Nova Scotia is doubling the tolls at the Cobequid Pass for commercial vehicles from the U.S. The NSLC is taking American products off the shelves, and American companies are now barred from bidding on provincial contracts. Some existing deals might be canceled, but that will depend on whether alternatives can be found. The Departments of Health and Public Works have some multi-million-dollar American contracts that are now under review. The hope is that retaliation will hurt the American economy and cause Trump to back down. This political scientist says that strategy has a bad track record.
You look at anything like that where you're trying to use an economic weapon against an adversary, and ultimately we bring out those words for adversaries, not allies. It never has the desired effect. It usually lands on impacting somebody who they didn't intend to strategically hit.
The impact of tariffs on local industries is not yet clear. The province has a $200 million contingency fund that it could deploy to provide relief. But for now, the Premier is encouraging people to change their consumer habits. Not a hard sell on the streets of Halifax.
I'm more conscious about the brands I'm selecting, what I'm buying at the grocery stores as well, day to day.
I think it's something that the U.S. is going to have a hard time in the future earning back the trust of Canadians and other countries abroad.
I feel betrayed, angry, disgusted.
Big changes to a once friendly relationship. Taryn Grant, CBC News, Halifax.
All right, Ryan, so some sunny skies today, but then the clouds rolled in.
Yeah, that's right. And it's going to be a bit messy overnight and into the early morning hours of Wednesday. If you're going to be commuting Wednesday morning, just a heads up on that, and certainly through the overnight. It's thanks to this warm front, which it has been increasing the clouds, and as that front slides in, we'll see, some mixed precipitation overnight into Wednesday morning. Then we will get into the warm sector of this system, which will bring quite a bit of rain Wednesday night, more so throughout the day on Thursday. Note the timeline of this. You can see through Tuesday evening, we're going to see this little push of some light snow and flurries moving through. This could drop as much as 2, 3, even 4 centimeters over places like the Cobequid Pass. A wet trace of snow possible for most areas. And note the timeline here as we move into the early morning hours of Wednesday. Temperatures still near the freezing mark, especially for the northeast half of the province, Cape Breton. The Northumberland Shore, Colchester, Cumberland, Hants, Inland, Halifax County, these are going to be the best chances to see some icy patches for Wednesday morning. Temperatures will have already bumped up above the freezing mark in through the south and west. We'll continue to see those temperatures rise throughout the day with a chance for some showers, but again, that heavier rain still to come for Wednesday night into Thursday. More on that coming up.
All right, more details to come. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Well, the Auditor General has issued another report critical of the way the province helps fund Nova Scotia's 10 universities. Kim Adair says those institutions get about 1/3 of their revenue from the province. But what Nova Scotia taxpayers are getting for their money is not entirely clear. Jean Laroche reports.
The AG is not pulling her punches, calling the current arrangement between the department, which oversees higher education and universities, troublesome.
We found the department was not effectively funding, monitoring, or holding universities accountable for those billions of dollars.
Adair says most of the billions of dollars that have gone to universities over the past 5 years have simply paid to keep them operating. When it comes to government funding, there's also a big gap when you look at the money on a per-student basis. The province's smallest university gets the largest amount, close to $26,000. Cape Breton's only university gets the least, just over $2,400 per student, while the province's largest, Dalhousie, gets just under $10,000 per student. That's the average. Adair says there appears to be no rhyme or reason to the funding formula. She is also calling into question so-called targeted health funding and whether universities have really created new doctors, nurses, and other workers for our health system.
At this point, it's unclear how many healthcare professionals have been added to the provincial workforce as a result of this funding.
The Minister of Advanced Education is not worried about not knowing the specifics.
We don't have the exact numbers, but what I can say is that we do know that, we're hiring more nurses than ever before, so something's working, right? Obviously, it's a success.
Maguire says a bill before the House this spring will give the government more control over the universities, not to tell them what to teach, but he says to make sure they are offering the courses and programs that people want, to ensure the province's 10 universities not only survive, but thrive. Jean Laroche, CBC News at Province House.
As debate on Bill 1 continues to make its way through the legislature, more attention is being given to a clause related to the Civil Service Act. The proposed amendments would give the government the power to fire non-unionized workers without cause. Michael Gorman reports.
Nova Scotia's Civil Service Act could undergo some major changes if new legislation passes. Among other things, Bill 1 would give deputy department heads the ability to fire non-unionized bureaucrats without cause. The cabinet minister responsible for the Public Service Commission describes the proposed change this way.
It's to give us greater flexibility in terms of greater flexibility so that responding quickly to changing needs in the public service.
But opposition leaders aren't so sure. They point to these recent emails Premier Tim Houston and his top deputy sent members of the public service. Houston talks about the need for the organization to evolve to meet new challenges and says each workplace has problem solvers and problem stretchers. Our province needs you to be a problem solver who is sympathetic to the needs of the Nova Scotians you are serving with a devotion to finding a solution to their challenge or issue. Our civil service needs problem solvers, and I have faith in you to be a problem solver. Employees are being asked to respond to a series of questions and engagement opportunities.
We're seeing that the public servants who are in charge of nonpartisan best practices in carrying out the government's mandate are essentially being threatened. So if they aren't seen as solving the problem in the way the government wants it solved, which we've already seen this session is not always the best way, they walk it back all the time, well, then they might get stretched right out of government.
Gross says there is no threat intended with the messages or legislation.
The whole idea is involving our employees, giving them the opportunity to give us ideas, again, as to how we can become more innovative, how we can become more agile, how we can become more responsive to the changing needs of Nova Scotians.
The head of the province's largest union is keeping a close eye on the situation. She says that at a time when the union is in bargaining with the province, there are concerns that Bill 1 could be a bellwether for her members and the job security language in their contract.
Folks are very alarmed when they see that, in light of the fact that the excluded folks are being told that they can be terminated without just cause. So it certainly raised many alarm bells for our members.
A statement from the province says employees who do not share ideas or whose ideas are not acted upon will not be penalized. Debate for Bill 1 could resume later this week. Michael Gorman, CBC News, Halifax.
Federal officials held a briefing today to outline efforts to bring the lucrative but troubled fishery for juvenile eels under control. The spring fishery for the tiny eels, known as elvers, is due to start in weeks. Past seasons have been marred by violence and widespread unauthorized fishing. This year, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans is introducing new regulations on possession and export. The department says officers will be patrolling the rivers, inspecting holding facilities and export points. The regulations are among a number of previously announced changes. The biggest is the redistribution of quota that will see First Nations gain access to half of the fishery. Officials say no one was injured after a fire broke out at a homeless encampment near the McDonald Bridge in Halifax. Firefighters were called to the area near the Barrington Street ramp just after 6 o'clock Tuesday morning. Callers reported smoke, flames, and some noises presumed to be small propane cylinders or other items exploding. Halifax Fire said there is no information yet on the cause of the fire. The encampment, known as the Barrington Street Green Space, is one of 5 designated encampment spaces in the city. Well, a new 10-week program is blending classroom learning with hands-on training for both students and people looking to build up their experience in the construction industry. At the same time, it's addressing Nova Scotia's skilled trades shortage and housing crisis. The CBC's Molly McNaughton has that story.
This new hands-on program is tackling Nova Scotia's housing crisis from 2 different angles. It's aiming to build more affordable housing, and at the same time, it's giving people work experience in the housing construction industry, which is in desperate need of skilled laborers.
We've really developed this program to make it so that the participants that are graduating from this program are ready to work.
Participants get paired up with a Red Seal instructor, and over 10 weeks, they learn how to build a 1-bedroom, net zero, tiny home. The council then works with housing nonprofits to find someone who needs an affordable place to live. The Tiny Home Construction Fundamentals program is free for part-time students 16 and older, or those who are either underemployed, unemployed, or are seeking skill redevelopment. They're also paid above minimum wage for their work.
We've had a number of folks that just weren't able to find success in traditional high school, where they've been able to come into this program and really be star students. And we also have individuals, as old as 59 who've decided that they wanted to explore other career paths.
While the program is funded by the province, it also partners with Cape Breton University and high schools in the Annapolis Valley to offer class credits. Zachary Caldwell is 17 and was a student at West Hants Education Centre. After dropping out, his principal suggested he join the program in order to finish high school.
Hopefully, I'm going to graduate school with the help from the 2 co-op credits. I like roofing, but framing's fun too, so hopefully I can use this to either further my framing or roofing career.
So there's going to be a bedroom here. There's going to be a closet here, then there's a door here, you walk out, the bathroom is right here, and then there's a linear kitchen here, and then over there is your little living area.
Now on its second course, some of the participants from the first cohort have already found jobs in the industry, while others have gone on to NSCC to further their skills. Those involved with the program say they hope to see more employers and schools across Nova Scotia get on board.
We want basically the whole province, if possible, to acquire the curriculum and run the program in their own little communities.
Molly McNaughton, CBC News, Windsor.
And there's a look at George's Island in Halifax Harbour. We've got Ryan up next with his full weather forecast. Do stay with us. We're back in a few. And welcome back. And Ryan, it sounds like we've got a push of warm weather on the way.
Yeah, after a pretty chilly start to March, picking up where February left off. And I know a lot of folks asking, where did February end up? And we finally have the numbers from Climate Atlantic. And these are the kind of the final tallies. You can see across the Maritimes, temperatures near to below average. Coolest spots, Greenwood and St. John, they're both more than a degree below average. Considered near average if it's within a degree, but Halifax Airport pretty close, and also Yarmouth, a little milder towards Shearwater and Sydney, where those were pretty much near average. But looking at the numbers, this is pretty comparable to February 2023, actually,
Okay.
a couple of years ago. But we certainly had some cold pushes in that month, no doubt about that. And in terms of precipitation, this continues to be a big story. Much of Nova Scotia now in a moderate drought, at the very least abnormally dry, and February certainly not helping that, with just 50 to 75% of the normal precipitation falling in that month. Of course, we didn't have a ton of snow, and so that continues to be a story that we're going to be watching as we move into the spring. We're going to need some wet weather. Mother Nature will deliver some more wet weather on the way, as you will see here in just a moment. Temperatures out there right now, already 2-3 degrees in through the Tri-County area. Those temperatures will, slowly but surely rise as we move through the overnight in through the south and west, but kind of steady near the freezing mark here through central areas until the wee morning hours. Current winds in from the southwest, continuing in that 20 kilometer per hour range. We're seeing some gusts upwards of 30 to 40 in through the Tri-County area. And here's the warm front that we talked about earlier. And again, it is bringing that a bit of a wintry mix along the boundary itself. The mild air surging up here in through the U.S., as well as some severe weather rolling into the U.S. as well right now. But you can note how temperatures are really pulling up here ahead of that system and cooling down on the other side of the system as we'll start to get into these big spring swings for sure. Now, watching the hour by hour, in case you missed it earlier, this is the push we're watching through the evening into the overnight, where we could see a couple of centimeters locally. Best chances are higher terrain areas towards the north and east. Into the 2-3 a.m. time frame, you can see temperatures continue to stay mild here, edging up a little bit towards Wednesday morning, even into the metro area, but watch for some potentially icy conditions in the northeast on Wednesday morning into Cape Breton, even back down towards the metro area. Temps are going to be borderline. Not too worried about those icy conditions down in through the south and west. And then as we move through Wednesday, generally just a cloudy day, though I do think we'll see a chance for some flurries mixing to a few showers into the Wednesday afternoon time period for Cape Breton in the northeast, and getting into a better chance of showers into the afternoon here across the south and west. Temperatures ranging from 3 to 5 degrees for Cape Breton, 6 to 10 degrees across the mainland, with the warmest temps in through the south and west. Timeline-wise, more showers overnight Wednesday into Thursday morning. Watch for fog patches to really become thick. Not only for Wednesday, we'll see those fog patches developing, but quite thick for Thursday as well. Some gusty southerly winds and periods of rain on the increase throughout Thursday. Temperatures 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 degrees. It's going to be very mild on Thursday. And of course, with those southerly winds, they'll be gusting 50, possibly 60 to even 70 along parts of the coast. So it is going to be very windy as well. And then for Thursday night in through Friday morning, we'll see that rain migrating eastward. Cape Breton's still pretty wet early on Friday. We'll see some showers tapering off, then back to a chance for flurries by Friday afternoon as those temperatures are going to fall. Rainfall amounts still a bit up in the air. Forecast models have yet to kind of nail this down, but right now it looks like kind of a 10 to 20 millimeter shot, or 10 to 30 millimeter shot, with heavier amounts towards New Brunswick, but we'll keep you posted on that as we get a little bit closer. On the backside of the system, things will clear out for Saturday into Sunday. Temperatures closer to the seasonal mark and some quiet weather, which would be nice.
Yeah, that would be very nice. All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Coming up, broken trust. What Donald Trump's tariffs mean for the relationship between the U.S. and Canada. Welcome back. As we mentioned earlier, Donald Trump has unleashed his trade war with America's closest neighbor, and Canada is retaliating, as promised, by imposing counter tariffs. The U.S. move caused a rare moment of unity across party lines in Ottawa. Ashley Burke reports.
The Prime Minister defiant, with a message aimed directly at Donald Trump.
Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
His comments carried live all over the U.S., where Trump claims his tariff war is about Canada allowing fentanyl across the border.
The excuse that he's giving for these Paris tariffs today of fentanyl is completely bogus, completely unjustified, completely false.
What Trump's really after, Trudeau says, is crushing Canada.
What he wants is to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy, because that'll make it easier to annex us.
And to Trudeau, what's chilling is how Trump's moving America away from its allies and closer to Moscow.
They're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator. Make that make sense.
To try and end it, Canada is striking back, slapping tariffs on $30 billion worth of American goods, like groceries, alcohol, and clothing, then hitting another $125 billion worth of U.S. products with taxes in 3 weeks.
President Trump stabbed America's best friend in the back.
The Conservatives leader says the money the government collects from counter tariffs should go into Canadians' pockets.
Almost every penny of the tariffs collected should go to tax cuts, with a small sum set aside for targeted relief to workers hardest hit by the trade war.
But the NDP's calling for immediate relief.
If you cut someone's taxes, they have no income, what's the point? I'm talking about getting people the protection in place that they need so they can actually survive.
The Prime Minister says this tariff war is going to hurt Canadians and is promising to expand EI benefits to help, but isn't releasing details yet. Trudeau also says the government plans to challenge what he calls America's illegal actions. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Robert Hewish is a political scientist at Dalhousie University with an expertise in international relations and sanctions. Happy to have you with us today.
Good to see you, Tom.
Help us try to put this into perspective. How monumental a day is this?
I think this is going to be a day where history will turn back to say this is now clear evidence where the Donald Trump White House, the Trump 2.0, is now putting rubber to the road and turning allies into enemies and ultimately trying to put policies into place that work against the American people. So there have been strong-headed presidents in the past. There's been tough times in the U.S. since its inception, no doubt. But to actually have someone in the executive office whose intent is to put in policies that will make it more difficult to grow an economy, for Americans to keep their jobs in order to afford things, and then also to completely undermine the U.S. security structure on that way too, that is something we could say, that's the day when things started to change.
Everyone is talking about the long game. What is really the intention behind all of this? Do you see this taking a long time? Is this something that is the new norm for a long time to come, do you think? Or is there something that could change things?
Yeah, I think we are in a state where we want to be hopeful and say, it's going to go back to the good old days and pick your president in the past if it's Obama or if you're a Bush fan or whatever. But I think we're past that. I think this is something where trust has been so deeply eroded by Donald Trump's White House that there's going to be no going back to the way that it was. There's going to be new opportunities for the future, but in a way that we're not going to be able to trust the executive office any further in the U.S. as being an ally. Now that's carefully said because I don't mean the American people, right? Our Americans, our Canadians, we're friends, we're family, we're natural business partners. But to see the power of the executive office pushed to this level, no matter who's in that White House afterwards, if it's a Democrat, Republican, or a third party, it will swing in one direction or the other. That's been pushed now. And what's allowing it to be pushed, Tom, is that there is no clear protest to any of this. I think many Canadians in particular are kind of edged out to say that where's the discontent? Where's
in the U.S.?
In the U.S., where are the Americans standing in solidarity? Where are the Americans taking to protest in the public spaces that they did in Trump 1.0?
Well, where are they, do you think?
It's been dismantled strategically. Even today, Trump basically put a motion forward to say that any protests on university campuses would be deemed illegal. So there's the First Amendment to the Constitution in the trash, right? So what's the next one that he can get away with? The thing is that when we see this, if it's something as just dumb is the right word that Prime Minister Trudeau used, dumb tariffs being put into place, we see that the only counter to that is through protests, through people challenging these orders. And if it is the public, if it is state level, or if it's Congress, people need to push back on this.
What about the stock markets? I mean, we're seeing those take a nosedive.
Yep.
How long does that is that allowed to continue to happen before some of that protest that you talk about maybe raises its head?
That's a good point, because when you go back to, say, the financial crisis of 2008, there was a lot of protests there. You had the Occupy Wall Street, you had the Tea Party movement, and you had the stock market on a dizzying roller coaster. So that might actually trigger some corporate response to Trump, but let's not forget that he surrounded himself with a lot of billionaire advisors, Mr. Musk included, who are starting to think that cryptocurrency might be a way out of this. And I think that really speaks to some sort of vision that Mr. Trump and some of the crony capitalists that he's got around him are wanting to see, is to stress test every system in the United States, be it financial, social, security, almost to the point of breaking.
So can they sell? I mean, for some people, this does maybe sound good. It may be playing well in the United States, what's happening in the Trump administration. But you know, how much of a sell job does the Trump administration have to do within the country if it starts to feel this pain for what could be weeks, months, or years?
Well, that's the whole thing, because you look at what Trump's done in the first few weeks of his second presidency, and very, very little of the policies he's put forward are going to see any benefit to the everyday American. And this is a country that for the last 4 years, or last 8 years, or at least a decade or more, has really suffered with serious inequalities, right? You have 1 in 2 people in the United States that are facing bankruptcy due to the 1 in 2 bankruptcies, are caused by healthcare related costs, right? You've got all sorts of social factors in the U.S. that you wouldn't find in another G7 nation. And we see that the Americans are kind of used to dealing with these really, really harsh inequalities, but not to the point of actually overthrowing some of the constitutional packages, the existing governance that's there, to say, look, we're still a nation. But the way that Trump is carrying on by dismantling internal structures, by going at the allies, and by ultimately putting policies in place that either intentionally or accidentally really fall in step with the ambitions of Mr. Vladimir Putin, once that all sort of comes to fruition and Americans realize that their commander-in-chief really has the interests of the Kremlin or his own ego above theirs, that we could start to see the kettle boiling over.
Okay, so that's the backstory as you see it. Imagine you're a Canadian government official and you're having to try to deal with this somehow. I imagine their heads are spinning as well. Do counter tariffs really work?
No. I mean, they're symbolic. You look at tariffs, you look at sanctions, you look at anything like that where you're trying to use an economic weapon against an adversary, and ultimately we bring out those words for adversaries, not allies. It never has the desired effect. It usually lands on impacting somebody who they didn't intend to strategically hit. And that we'll just have to see how it unfolds. The premiers who are incumbent, those who will be, taking up new posts or new prime minister coming in, I think they need to realize that when they're dealing with the American people, they're still our friends, they're still our family, they're still our business partners, and putting tariffs on them might feel symbolic, but it's going to hurt the people. The real issue here is that we're dealing with an adversary in the White House, and politicians of municipal, federal, provincial, we're in for a fight, and we're going to have to fight like we're chained to the wheel.
Just before I let you go, Donald Trump is fond of recounting the history of President McKinley and tariff history. What are the lessons learned from that experience?
Well, McKinley, maybe that was the era when he decided to make America great again. McKinley, in his memoir, he regretted putting tariffs and talking about annexation during his presidency, because the annexation expansion of the U.S. occurred with President McKinley in 1898 with taking over territories from Spain, and then also serving up a litany of tariffs along the way. He regretted that afterwards because it didn't have the effects that he desired. And again, McKinley, like Trump today, surrounded by the robber barons of the era. And I think that's the similarity that we're drawing today.
We're going to be talking about this again in the future, no doubt. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
Coming up, more on the trade war between Canada and the U.S. and how provinces are striking back. And Trump pauses all military aid to Ukraine after an intense Oval Office argument with Volodymyr Zelensky. Welcome back. The response to the U.S. tariffs from Canada's provincial premiers was equally swift, equally critical, and equally defiant. The CBC's Olivia Stefanovich has that story.
As soon as they opened, liquor stores across the country began emptying their shelves of American booze to send U.S. President Donald Trump a message.
Unfortunately, some people seem to need to touch the hot stove to learn that it's hot. And while we cannot control or predict their behavior, we can control how we respond.
And to see this escalation is so disappointing, so damaging.
You know, he put up a...
Premiers hit the U.S. cable circuit.
The market is speaking loud and clear. The market is going to go downhill faster than the American bobsled team.
And announced plans to ban Americans from bidding on provincial contracts while tearing up existing agreements.
We're ripping up Ontario's contract with Starlink. It's done, it's gone. We won't award contracts to people who enable and encourage economic attacks on our province and our country.
But they didn't go so far as to shut off the lights of American customers. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says he's prepared to apply a 25% surcharge on electricity exports if Trump doesn't relent. And he's not alone.
We must not rule out anything for the future.
Quebec is also mulling further retaliatory options, including targeting American electricity, with 160,000 jobs at risk in La Belle Province alone.
It is a very sad day to have to find ourselves in a trade war with a long-standing partner.
Especially after spending tens of millions of dollars to boost security at border crossings.
I would say that without doubt, the president's demands were met. And yet, it did not matter.
Now that punishing levies are in place, the focus is shifting to financial support. New Brunswick is already offering $40 million to help companies find other markets, with other provinces following with similar measures.
We are going to get through it. It is going to be tough. It is going to cost money.
The premiers met with the Prime Minister to discuss how to help Canadian industries and workers cope with the economic pain and feared recession looming on the horizon. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Donald Trump is responding to Canada's countermeasures against his tariffs. The U.S. president took to social media mocking the Prime Minister and threatening to escalate the trade war even further. Megan Fitzpatrick reports from Washington.
After weeks of threats, negotiations, and delays, President Donald Trump pulled the tariff trigger on America's continental trading partners. The U.S. markets didn't react well to the new tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods and the additional tariff on China that went into effect just after midnight. Stock markets plummeted when trading got underway. Trump pays close attention to the markets, and it seems he was also tuning in to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's news conference where he announced Canada's plan to retaliate. Soon after it finished, the president wrote on social media, "Please explain to Governor Trudeau of Canada that when he puts on a retaliatory tariff on the U.S., our reciprocal tariff will immediately increase by a like amount." Trump, who has taken to calling Trudeau governor as part of his musing about Canada becoming a 51st state, plans to impose even more tariffs in early April on any country that has tariffs on U.S. goods. Those measures will layer on top of today's tariffs and on top of planned tariffs on steel and aluminum coming into effect next week. Today's tariffs, though, are all because Canada failed to stop the flow of fentanyl across the border, according to Vice President J.D. Vance.
The Canadians have allowed a lot of fentanyl to come into the country. It's not a defense to say more has come from Mexico, because way too much has come from Mexico, too.
Trump is expected to promote his tariff plan later tonight when he delivers a speech to Congress. On Capitol Hill, some Republicans are cheering on his use of tariffs.
All these countries around the world have taken advantage of America. The America First agenda is to reset those relationships.
But critics like Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren say the tariffs will drive up prices for Americans and hurt a friendly ally.
We don't have those kinds of problems with Canada. They've done everything they can. They're a cooperative neighbor here. And across-the-board tariffs like this, just so that Donald Trump can beat his chest about how tough he is with a neighbor, it's not helping us. What it's doing is it's driving up costs.
The CEO of major retailer Target warned Americans today that food prices could shoot up within days. So with a trade war now underway, consumers on both sides of the U.S.-Canada border are bracing for just how hard these tariffs might hit their wallets. Megan Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Washington.
Ukraine's president is calling last week's verbal spat between Donald Trump and him regrettable. His remarks come a day after the U.S. president ordered a halt on military aid to Ukraine while it fights off Russian aggression. Trump has been trying to get a deal allowing the U.S. access to Ukraine's mineral deposits. Chris Brown reports.
Ukrainians, of course, feared this day might come, that their biggest, most important ally might abandon its military support. We've heard the word betrayal and a lot of comments from ordinary Ukrainians, although government officials are trying to sound calm. President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was admonished and humiliated by Donald Trump and his VP last week in Washington, took to social media and he said it's time to make things right. He said the encounter in the White House was regrettable and that Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table under Donald Trump's strong leadership in search of peace and also to sign that minerals agreement. So not quite an apology that the White House appeared to be demanding, but clearly some very contrite words. Will it be enough, though, to get the weapons pause lifted? The implications for Ukraine's ability to hold off Vladimir Putin's army are extremely serious, while Ukraine likely has enough weaponry to secure the front lines for a few months. The cumulative impact of losing U.S. air defense systems and long-range missiles will be extremely damaging.
Without the missiles and ammunition for air defense, without it, there will be more casualties among civilians and more damages to civilian and strategic infrastructure.
The head of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, vowed that Europe will step up.
Rearm Europe could mobilize close to 800 billion euros of defense expenditures for a safe and resilient Europe. We will, of course, continue working closely with our partners in NATO. This is a moment for Europe, and we are ready to step up.
Beyond Ukraine, in the streets of Moscow, we've heard Russians sounding quite gleeful that they're happy with Trump's decision, as now the Ukrainians won't have anything to fight with. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
While the brutal war in Ukraine rages on the ground, Europe is also locked in a different conflict, grappling with Russian threats online. And Canada is learning firsthand on the digital front line with Latvian soldiers. The CBC's Murray Brewster got an inside look.
War games in Latvia. Canadians and other NATO nations rehearsing to defend this Baltic country from a hypothetical Russian invasion.
We were about 6 kilometers that way. My whole squadron was up all night scanning our thermals, waiting for the enemy to come.
In this exercise, the Swedes, NATO's newest members, are playing the role of the Russians. There is, however, no role playing at this headquarters. Behind these walls, the conflict between Russia and NATO is already playing out in real time online.
Latvia has been the target of Russian cyber operations since their very beginning.
CBC News was given exclusive access to the joint center where Latvian and Canadian cyber warriors conduct operations, repelling Russian attacks on critical infrastructure, such as the power grid, the banking system, and border controls, and sometimes turning the tables, rooting out intruders before they strike.
We've had some experience engaging in what you might call a cyber dogfight, if you will, where they know that we are after them, and we know that they're on the system, and each counterpart tries to kind of kick the cyber operators from the environment.
Every operation we conduct here in Latvia is defensive in nature. We are securing their networks and assuring their systems.
Canada has had a small team embedded since last summer, the cyber cavalry for the Latvians.
They are capable of performing this work, but there are not enough cybersecurity professionals in Latvia. And then we both learn from each other.
The other benefit to being at the front lines of this particular cyber war, Canadians are gaining first-hand threat intelligence, a glimpse at Russian tactics that will protect critical infrastructure, not only in Latvia, but back home. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Riga, Latvia.
Ontario's health system is the latest to change its screening for cervical cancer, opting to test for the virus believed to cause the vast majority of cases. The CBC's Jennifer Yoon reports on the reasons for the change and the broader effort at early detection.
Ontarians getting a cervical cancer screening may not notice the difference, but starting Monday, doctors will have a more accurate test for the cancer, which kills hundreds of Canadians every year.
Cervix cancer in Canada is really low because we have screening tests, but it's the highest rising cancer in women because people aren't getting screened. Here's a better test.
The HPV test will now replace the Pap test in Ontario, following the lead of Quebec, BC, and PEI. HPV is responsible for 95% of cervical cancers.
Putting the sample.
And the test gives doctors a sense of whether your cells could become cancerous in the future. The Pap test only picks up abnormal cells that already exist.
We can evaluate your cervix earlier and not wait for there to be harm. So it gives us an idea of who to look at more closely and when to do that.
The Pap, you go to the little circle.
There's another benefit. A Pap test needs to be done every 3 years. HPV tests can be done every 5. But it still requires a pelvic exam, which can be uncomfortable.
I hate pelvic exams, history of trauma, cultural sensitivities.
British Columbia tried to change that with less invasive self-testing kits you can do in the comfort of your own home. But it's not been perfect. Those deemed high risk could need a colposcopy, a specialized procedure that looks more closely at the cervix. Since BC put in place self-testing, there's been a backlog.
We have been experiencing increase in wait times to colposcopy as a result of the surge in screening and the surge in positive results.
Despite that, BC's program director says self-testing does work. It's accessible and accurate. Health officials in Ontario say they're looking at making self-tests widely available once they have more data. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
North American stock markets closed out a volatile trading day with broad losses as the U.S. imposed sweeping tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico, triggering a continental trade war. Here's a look at how the markets did as we head to break. Okay, we're still early March,
Yep.
but there are some warm days coming. Warm-ish. Warmer.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, this time of year, I think we can call double digits warm, and that it's all relative, right?
Right.
And certainly, a warm push coming, and that will, have folks thinking about spring yet again. And speaking of that, have a look at this picture of the day as we zoom in on the Halifax area and Dartmouth, to be exact. This picture taken a couple of days ago.
Definitely some signs of spring.
Yeah, Andrew and Susan said when the snow and ice melted, there's some snowdrops there starting to at least show themselves. So,
aptly named, right?
Yes, for sure. Ryan's picks at cbc.ca. If you're seeing some signs of spring over the next couple of days, do let us know. There is a forecast for Wednesday. Temperatures bumping up into the 3-4 range for Cape Breton by the end of the afternoon. 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10 degrees across the mainland. Warmest temps in through the south and west. Again, watching for that little bit of light snow overnight into the Wednesday morning time period. Enough to make things slick, especially through the northeast of the province and into Cape Breton. Possibly down towards the metro area as well, though temperatures likely warm enough in through the south and west. And then we've got the wet weather moving in for Wednesday night in through Thursday with rain, drizzle, and fog.
All right, thanks for that, Ryan. Well, a Mexican man is so proud of his toy collection, he takes it with him wherever he goes. Juan Carlos Flores has hundreds of toys glued all over his car, both inside and outside. It's been a childhood dream for him since his mother couldn't afford to buy them.
After a lifetime of hardship, he says his ever-growing collection helps cheer him up, and if admiration from strangers and children is any indication, he's not alone in finding joy.
All right, well, that is it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Good night.